Ekaterina barely managed to close the door behind her when she heard voices, loud, sharp, filled with cold calculation. She froze, her fingers whitening as she gripped the grocery bags tightly. "Mom, Tanya is a whole different matter. She's a doctor just like you. Let Ekaterina go to her Italy, and I'll finally live like a human being," came the voice of her husband, Alexei. Ekaterina felt the ground slip away from under her. "Are you serious?" laughed her mother-in-law, Nina. "Who's going to bring in money? You've been sitting at home for 10 years like a disabled person, though you're perfectly healthy." "So what? Let Ekaterina send money from Italy. If anything happens, we'll divorce, and I'll file for alimony. We'll split the apartment." Ekaterina couldn't hear anything more. The blood was pounding in her temples, and her vision darkened. Disability? A farce? 10 years of lies? She automatically placed the bags on the floor and, without waiting for the elevator, rushed down the stairs. Her heart was tearing out of her chest, but a plan was already forming in her mind. Outside, the sun was shining brightly. Children were laughing, birds were singing. But her world had collapsed. Ekaterina pulled out her phone. "Daniil Andreevich, I agree. I'm going to Italy." The voice on the other end sounded warm. "Ekaterina, that's a wonderful decision." "Thank you," she whispered, feeling the weight lift off her shoulders. And then, with more confidence, "And did you really invite me for dinner?" "Of course," he laughed. Ekaterina smiled through her tears. A new life was beginning. Ekaterina sat in a cozy restaurant with a view of the evening city, but her thoughts were far away. The wine in her glass remained untouched, and her fingers nervously fiddled with the edge of the tablecloth. "You're in the clouds," Daniil said gently, leaning towards her. His brown eyes looked at her with warmth and understanding. "Sorry," she sighed. "It's just 10 years. 10 years I believed he was sick, that he couldn't work or be stressed. But it turned out." Her voice trembled, but she wouldn't let herself cry. "You're not to blame," Daniil said firmly. "You were strong, maybe too strong." He poured her more wine and pushed a napkin aside to take her hand. "Italy is a chance to start over. For you. For Igor." Ekaterina looked at him. For the first time in many years, she felt that someone saw her, not the exhausted, frantic woman she had become. "What if I don't make it?" she whispered. "You will," he smiled. "I'll help you." And in that moment, something clicked inside her. Why not? The next day, Ekaterina packed her things. Igor, upon hearing about the trip, was jumping with excitement. "Mom, are we really going to see the Colosseum?" "We are," she smiled, ruffling his hair. But when she started carrying the suitcases out, Alexei appeared in the doorway. "You're really leaving?" he asked, and for the first time in years, there was uncertainty in his voice. Ekaterina stopped. "Yes, and you know what?" She turned to him, her voice firm. "I'm glad I overheard that conversation. Otherwise, I would have lived in your lies forever." He tried to say something, but she was already out the door, slamming it behind her. The airplane touched down on the runway at Malpensa Airport, and Ekaterina instinctively tightened her grip on Igor's hand. "Mom, are we here?" Igor whispered, his eyes wide. "Yes, son. This is Italy," she replied, feeling a small spark of hope ignite in her chest. The streets outside the taxi were filled with unfamiliar roads, bright signs, and smiling people. Milan greeted them with warm sunlight and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. "It's so beautiful here," Igor exclaimed, sticking his face to the window. Ekaterina smiled, but inside, her emotions were a mix of excitement, fear, and anticipation for the new life that lay ahead, her first trial. The apartment Daniil had rented for them was cozy and bright. "It has everything you need," he said, handing Ekaterina the keys. "Your internship starts tomorrow. How are you feeling?" "Scared," she admitted. "I haven't practiced Italian for so long." "You'll be fine," Daniil said confidently. "I believe in you." His words warmed her heart, but that night Ekaterina tossed and turned, thinking about the day ahead, her first victory. The factory amazed Ekaterina with its scale, modern equipment, the hum of the workshops, and people speaking in different languages. Everything was so different from the company back home. Signora Ekaterina, a tall man with glasses, approached her. "Sono Marco, il vostro supervisore." Ekaterina took a deep breath and forced herself to respond in Italian. To her surprise, the words came to her easily. By the end of the day, Marco nodded approvingly. "Bene, domani continuiamo." It was a small victory, but it meant the world to Ekaterina. Her first worry. That evening, while putting Igor to bed, Ekaterina received a message. "How are you?" "Alexei." Her fingers instinctively clenched the phone. Why was he writing? What did he want? "Mom, will Dad come to see us?" Igor asked, as though sensing her tension. "No, son," she said firmly. "This is our life now." But when the child fell asleep, Ekaterina stepped out onto the balcony and stared at the stars, wiping away treacherous tears. 3 weeks in Milan had turned Ekaterina's days into a series of new experiences. Morning espresso on the corner terrace, the drive to the factory through lively streets, evening walks with Igor along the Navigli canals. But this morning started differently. Her phone rang at 6:17. An unfamiliar Russian number flashed on the screen. "Hello?" Ekaterina's voice sounded hoarse from sleep. "Ekaterina, it's Nina." The cold tone of her mother-in-law immediately woke her up. "You must come back. It's urgent." "What happened?" Ekaterina jumped out of bed, her heart racing. "Alexei's in the hospital. A heart attack. A real one." The line went dead with a click. Corridors of memory. The taxi sped through the streets, merging into red streaks. Ekaterina held the phone tightly, rereading the last messages from Alexei. "I'm sorry. I was a fool." "You deserve happiness?" "Why now? Why after everything?" "Mom, where are we going?" Igor asked anxiously, seeing her pale face. "To the hospital, my love." Face to face. The Galatsi hospital greeted them with the sterile smell of antiseptic. Alexei lay in the intensive care room, hooked up to monitors, pale, a stranger. "You came," he whispered, struggling to focus. Ekaterina silently approached the bed. 10 years of care, 10 years of lies, and now this man was truly dying. "Why did you call me?" she asked Nina, who stood in the corner. "Because he was calling for you. In delirium. An unexpected confession." When the doctors left, Alexei weakly took Ekaterina's hand. I wanted to fix things. I applied to remove my disability status. I got a job as a loader." Ekaterina froze. "Are you out of your mind?" She didn't finish, understanding the absurdity of the situation. "Tanya left. She found out I had no apartment." Tears welled up in his eyes. Real tears. A decisive choice. It was raining outside. Ekaterina stood under an awning, watching the raindrops blur the outlines of the city. In her pocket was a return ticket to Milan. In the hospital room, the man who had destroyed her life. The phone vibrated. "Daniil." "A decision has been made about your contract. A permanent position. Call when you can." Igor hugged her waist. "Mom, will Dad die?" Ekaterina closed her eyes. In that moment, she realized, no matter what choice she made, it would define who she was forever. The rain lashed against the pavement, turning the Milan streets into reflective streams. Ekaterina stood in front of the mirror in the bathroom of her apartment, looking into the eyes of the woman she had almost forgotten, the same Ekaterina who once dreamed, believed, and loved without hesitation. "Mom?" Igor gently opened the door. "Are you crying?" She ran her finger down her cheek, surprised to find moisture. "No, darling, it's just the rain." The phone on the sink vibrated. "Nina." "His condition is seriously unstable. Doctors say if there's rehab, there's a chance." Then a message from Daniil. "Contract signed. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock, your project presentation. We need you here." Ekaterina straightened up suddenly. The hospital corridor. Nina met her gaze with silent reproach. "I came for one day," Ekaterina said firmly, stopping a meter away from her mother-in-law. "Where are the rehab documents?" "Are you really going to leave him now?" Nina's voice quivered. "After everything." "After everything he did?" Ekaterina suddenly laughed. "You both know very well, if it weren't for this heart attack, he'd still be lying to me, spending my money on his mistress." Silence. "The rehab center is in Switzerland," Nina suddenly said. "The best cardiologists. But? It'll cost money, the money you got through your lawyer." Ekaterina exhaled slowly. So that's what it was, the last conversation. Alexei was sleeping when she entered. The monitors beeped softly, reflecting the uneven rhythm of his heart. "I know you can hear me," Ekaterina began quietly. "I'll pay for your rehabilitation. But that's it." His eyelids fluttered. "Igor," he whispered. "He'll call you when he wants to." She placed an envelope with a check and a ticket to Geneva on the bedside table. "Why?" He opened his eyes, confusion in them. "After everything Ekaterina was already at the door. "Because I'm not you, morning of a new life." The factory meeting hall was full. Daniil smiled at her from the presidium. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you our new creative director, Ekaterina Petrova." Applause, camera flashes. Igor was in the front row, beaming with pride. When she looked up, in the distant corner, she saw a familiar face. Alexei stood in the doorway, leaning on a crutch, watching her with the same look he had on their wedding day 10 years ago. He turned and left before she could understand anything. The Milan evening wrapped the city in golden lights when Ekaterina left the office building of the factory. In her hands, she held a folder with sketches for a new collection, her first independent work, which was to go into production tomorrow. "Mom, look!" Igor tugged at her sleeve, pointing at the pastry shop window. "Can I have some cannoli?" "You promised!" Ekaterina smiled, brushing her hand through his tousled hair. "Just one. Or dinner." Her voice broke when, in the reflection of the window, she saw him. Alexei. He was standing in the shadow under the arch across the street, in a worn leather jacket he hadn't had before. His face, usually pale, now looked tanned, and there was a strange resolve in his eyes. "Mom!" "Why did you freeze?" "Nothing, darling." Ekaterina abruptly turned away, feeling a cold sweat run down her spine. "Let's get your cannoli and go home." But when they left the pastry shop, Alexei was already crossing the street, heading straight toward them. Milan evening wrapped the city in golden lights as Ekaterina stepped out of the office building of the factory. In her hands she held a folder with designs for a new collection, her first independent work, which was to go into production the next day. "Mom, look!" "Chai?" Igor tugged at her sleeve, pointing at the pastry shop window. "Can I have some cannoli? You promised." Ekaterina smiled, running her hand through his tousled hair. "Just one, or dinner." Her voice faltered when, in the reflection of the window, she saw him. Alexei. He stood in the shadow under the arch across the street, wearing a worn leather jacket he hadn't had before. His usually pale face now looked tanned, and there was a strange determination in his eyes. "Mom, why did you freeze?" "Nothing, darling." Ekaterina turned away quickly, feeling a cold sweat trickle down her back. "Let's get your cannoli and go home." But as they exited the pastry shop, Alexei was already crossing the street, heading straight toward them. "Ekaterina." His voice was rough but quiet. She slowly turned around. Alexei was standing just a meter away from them, holding an envelope in his hand. "You need to see this," he said, extending the documents to Ekaterina, ignoring Igor's confused gaze. "Before you sign the contract tomorrow." Ekaterina instinctively stepped back. "Have you been following me?" Yes, he didn't lie. And for good reason. Inside the envelope were photographs, Daniil, Nina, and the signature at the bottom of the contract that changed everything. Ekaterina's trembling fingers unfolded the envelope. The first photograph hit her mind like a sledgehammer. Daniil and Nina were sitting in a cozy Milan cafe, signing some documents. The date in the corner of the photo, 3 days before her departure to Italy. "What is this?" Her voice broke into a whisper. "Read." Alexei glanced at Igor, who was frozen with cannoli in his hand. "But not here." They moved to a nearby park where the fountain's roar drowned out the silence. Ekaterina quickly pulled the contract out of the envelope. Her eyes scanned the lines. "Agreement to transfer the rights to Ekaterina Petrova's design work." If she signs the permanent contract— Ekaterina looked up at her ex-husband, confusion in her eyes. "Are you trying to say that Daniil has been working with my mother from the start?" Alexei finished for her, his face contorted in pain. "They plan to squeeze everything out of you, and then— You know what breach of contract means in Italy, right?" Igor tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, what is he talking about?" But Ekaterina didn't hear her son. Her mind was racing, replaying details. How easily Daniil had agreed to take her to Italy, how quickly the paperwork had been arranged, how insistent he had been about her signing the contract tomorrow. "Why are you showing me this?" she whispered. "After everything we went through?" Alexei took a step closer. There was a strange fire in his eyes. "Because I finally realized we were both pawns in their game." Somewhere in the distance, laughter echoed. A group of tourists passed by, but their joy seemed mocking to Ekaterina. In her hands, she held the evidence that her new life was nothing but a cleverly set trap. "What do we do now?" she asked, and in that moment, for the first time in many years, she felt that "we" meant her and Alexei. Her ex-husband pulled a set of car keys from his pocket. "We have exactly 12 hours to find proof and ruin their deal." He checked the time. "Get ready for a dangerous game, Ekaterina. This time, we play for keeps." Igor gripped her hand tightly. In his eyes was a silent question. Who can we trust now? Ekaterina pulled him to her side and looked him straight in the eyes. "It will be okay. This time. I promise." Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Daniil Andreevich was picking up the phone. "Yes, she just met him. Yes, I understand. Tomorrow everything will be ready." He hung up the phone and reached for his glass of wine. On the table in front of him lay the same contract, but this one was signed by Nina. In the special conditions section it read, "In case Ekaterina Petrova fails to meet her obligations, full deportation from the country and inclusion in the EU blacklist." Ekaterina, Alexei, and Igor sped through the nighttime Milan in an old Fiat that Alexei had rented under a false name. The silence in the car was oppressive. Only the occasional monotone voice of the GPS interrupted it. "Where are we going?" Igor finally asked, gripping the envelope with the photos in his hands. "To the archive." Alexei gritted his teeth, sharply turning the wheel. There's something there that will tie Daniil and my mother together. Ekaterina looked out the window, feeling the rage and betrayal burning inside her. "You knew about this from the start?" she asked abruptly. Alexei gritted his teeth. "Number I found out when I tried to get back the money you spent on my rehab. My mother refused to return it and let slip about more important plans." He slammed on the brakes in front of a nondescript building on the outskirts of the city. "We're here, the archive, dusty corridors, the smell of old paper." Alexei led the way confidently, as if he had been there before. "What are we looking for?" Ekaterina whispered. "The sale contract for the factory." He stopped in front of a metal cabinet. "The same factory you worked for in Russia. My mother sold it to Daniil a year ago. And the condition was you." Ekaterina went cold. "What?" "Bio, you were part of the deal, Ekaterina. Your skills, your designs. They planned to make you a prisoner of the contract, so you'd work for them for next to nothing." Igor, who had been silent up to that point, suddenly yanked a sheet from the folder. "Mom, look! It was a photo!" Daniil and Nina were shaking hands. On the day of her departure to Italy, Ekaterina snatched the documents. "That's enough." Her voice was trembling. "We're going to the police." "No." Alexei sharply stopped her. "They have connections everywhere. We only have one option." He pulled the car keys from his pocket. "We run. Right now." Ekaterina looked at Igor, then at the documents in her hands. "Where to?" Alexei smiled for the first time that evening. "To where they can't reach us." Ekaterina stood at the edge of the private airstrip just outside Milan. In her hands was a folder with documents that could destroy Daniil and Nina's careers. In her pocket, one-way tickets. "Are you sure?" Alexei looked at her, shielding Igor from the cold wind. She slowly tore the contract in half. "I'm not going to take revenge, nor run." The pieces of paper scattered in the wind. "Then what?" Ekaterina pulled out her phone and sent one message, to Daniil. "I know everything. The documents are safe. If I ever see you near my son, they will go to the police and the media. Try to find me." Then she crushed the SIM card under her heel. 1 year later, a small boutique in Lisbon. Ekaterina was receiving the award for the best shoe design of the year. In the hall, neither Daniil nor Nina were present. Only Igor, who now spoke Portuguese better than Russian, and one person in the back row, Alexei. He didn't approach. He simply left white roses and a note by the exit. "You did it. I'm proud of you." Ekaterina smiled and let go of the past. Sometimes happiness isn't revenge, money, or even justice. It's simply a quiet morning in a new city, where no one is waiting, where no one will betray you. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Which moment of the story left the biggest impression on you? Share your thoughts. Maybe your story can help someone make the right choice.